Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And if we have not met, I am Matt Ward, president here at Faith Bible College International, and we are bringing you leadership insight because we believe that you have a desire to make a greater impact, to make a difference in your family, your organization, and your community. Well, Glenn, how are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm doing good. You look great.
Makes it easier.
Really appreciate your time while they're getting your video on for everybody to see you. I do appreciate your time today, and we're going to make the most of it over the next 50 minutes here. Are you in St. John today?
I am. Yeah, we're unfortunately we've been pretty locked down in the province as far as travel outside the province now for, I guess, over the year. So it's so normally I travel upwards to 200 days a year, and this year it's been pretty office bound.
When's the last time you traveled?
Out of the country would have been probably last March, actually. So it's been completely 12 months since we have done some other Atlantic Canadian travel when it was open last summer, but out of the country it's been over a year, that's huge.
So is your wife excited for this to end, or
the problem, then you got to get used to your wife and family. It's got to get used to you traveling again. So there's a whole process that has to take to do that. So we our operation is global. We have operations in a lot of countries around the world between sales and actually operations, and so you can do so much virtual. Including buying some businesses. We've actually bought some businesses without ever actually seeing them, but there is the need to travel.
It's amazing that you could get that done, and but I just know that you and everybody in your company will be very happy to be able to get back to traveling like you did. Do you see some means of? I think it probably is obvious, but there have got to be some communication changes that won't change for your company. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that is the case. I mean, we've had a lot of travel, like over our organizations, whether it's people in accounting or people in IT and production. People have traveled the world historically, and I think that will change some of their travel going forward. With myself, not as likely, just because you've got senior people all over the world, and you need to kind of press the flesh and sit down and have your discussions and make sure you can kind of build that relationship, which we have. And so that's a little more harder to do virtually, and we certainly have tried that. But I do think there will be less business travel going forward.
Well, they're working on our connections, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask you a couple of questions. And the first, I think probably you get asked frequently, and I don't think we should assume that everybody else knows. But if you would explain to those that are joining us today, what is aquaculture?
Yeah. So, and I may add a little to that as I go, but aquaculture is basically farming of fish, whether that's in the sea or whether that's on freshwater resources. And so we raise a bunch of different species. We raise Atlantic salmon in Canada, Chile, and Scotland. We raise sea bass and sea bream in Spain, and we actually raise shrimp in Nicaragua and Honduras, and actually we do some oysters out of North Carolina. But we do also have a large fishery side. We have very large fish meal and fish oil plants. We produce about 7% of the world's fish oil, which is, if you're in that part of, here we go, the world, as far as fish oil and fish meals, we're actually a major producer. We have operations in Alaska. We're involved in the wild salmon business there. We're involved in the ground fish as well in Alaska, pollock and cod. And we've got fishing operations in Uruguay where we do offshore frozen hake and squid and a bunch of products, as well as we have 2 frozen at sea crab trawlers there. And we have fishing operations in Argentina where we do offshore frozen at sea scallops and crab, and we have domestic operations in the US where we do scallops as well. So we're kind of very spread out in a lot of different species.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think everybody would assume this just didn't happen overnight. And you didn't really inherit a large business. So I kind of want to talk back to the beginning, because we have a lot of young leaders, both here in the college and around the world, that are watching today. What are some of those lessons that you learned in those humble beginnings, Glenn, that mean so much to you now?
So I grew up my early days in a company town that basically the whole town was owned and run by a company that we obviously didn't own. And so I ended up working my summers and holidays in the kind of in around the fishing industry, processing and that type of thing. But early on, I felt, number one, a call on my life, and I didn't feel it was go to Bible school and thank goodness become a pastor, because I'll leave that to the pros. I'm not at all capable of that. So I did feel a call for business, and early on, I come to what I wanted, where I wanted to go for business, and felt that call. And then so I graduated high school, and I thought I was too intelligent to go to college. Soon found out was a big error in my ways and my ego. And I quickly, my first business was a failure. I lost my shirt, and I lost some other people's shirts along the way. And that taught me one thing. That taught me a lot of things, but taught me the major thing that is failure. And it taught me that failure is not fun, and that I want to make sure whatever I do in my life that I push for success and not failure. And being an entrepreneur, I always take risks, and I think that's a normal part of entrepreneurship, that you do take risks. But the fear of failure and has driven, I guess, the will of success.
Yeah, it's so good. And you talk about that entrepreneurial mindset that you had right from the beginning. How is it that you seem to find success in businesses that others fail in, or in businesses that other people overlook?
I think early on, like I realized if I was going to build a company or build a success story, that, I knew I had to have successful people alongside of me. And I've seen the failures of a lot of business early up, is that you get an entrepreneur in there and he's so straight, he's going to run it. He doesn't take advice. He doesn't build a team around him. He knows it all, and he's insecure, so he doesn't rely on other people's advice or to download information. So very early on, we started building teams, successful teams. And, even today, we've got long members of the team that's been here for 30, 35 years, which seems like a long time. But, that basically grew with the company as we grew. And so we put those people in place. And I'm a person that's a collaborator. So I don't mind taking other people's advice. I certainly don't know everything. I mean, I can sit with the accountants and handle myself with the best of them. I can handle myself the best with the sales guy and the lawyer in between. But in the end, is you need top quality people at those different levels to drive the business. And so I think reliance on people and was good. We hired the best and built the best, and I am not insecure and haven't been. Like, to me, is I want the advice. I'm not scared to take it. And so that was important. And I think, because we were a success in our early farming operation with our people, we knew what we could do. And then I think the other top of that, we had a vision where other people kind of locked themselves in the very short, small visions, where they they really didn't take in consideration of where they're going, how they were going to get there. They were just, well, we're going to make some money. And we were big in the concept is, I sat down and I remember very early in business putting a game plan. This is where I wanted to be in so many years, and this is how we were going to get there. And we just continue to build it, and God brought incredible opportunities. We first got in the business, there was, 3 very large multinationals and well over, I think, 40 some different players. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking in New Brunswick and Maine. And, in a matter of really 15 or 16 years, we were down to ourselves and one other small player. We just acquired them all. We acquired the multinationals. We acquired 3 multinationals that were losing over $30 million a year. And we turned those around very fast, very quick, because we just kind of put how we were doing things right within those and picked the good out of each one of them. And so we continued to build the business, that way and then once, we had the core, so we had a North America really generating a good income and basically, very integrated. That's the other big piece of the puzzle. I wanted to be integrated. I didn't want to have to rely on other people's for major pieces of our supply chain. And, so today we make we have our own brood stock that has our own genetics that raises our fish and our fresh water to go to our seawater. We have our own fish feed plants. We actually have our own fish meal and fish oil plants that supply that ingredients to the fish feed plants to feed our fish. And we have our own processing plants, our own trucking firms. And, we have a sales organization globally, all over North America and all over Europe, and South America. So, we built those pieces so that we didn't have to rely on somebody else's that fit into our value chain, because we just didn't want to rely on that. So we're probably one of the most integrated producers in the world from that perspective. And we've started going down the value chain. We're actually buying into seafood distributors and stuff so that we can get closer to our customers on the other end.
To me, it's just brilliance. When you put all of those attributes together, I guess it takes the limits off of what you can and cannot, what you decide what you can do. Like I don't think that you have a concept of what can't be done. You've built the concept of this is what can be done.
I'm big in like, to me, there's nothing that we can't take on as a company and do. And it's like, I still have made, the company's been basically doubling every 5 years, and we're at about 2.4 billion in sales globally today. And someone says, well, how are you ever going to do that in the next 5? But we've got plans and we're actively trying to grow the business. As a family, we've always reinvested to grow, and build it. And so, I continue to do that. And so it's I think part of what also, growth begets growth. Like if you have a growth mentality, and can get your people to believe that growth mentality, then they can get excited on that growth, and they want that growth, and they don't mind. They know they have to expand themselves and their careers and everything else to be part of that growth. There's excitement that basically comes become part of that growth, and so we have strong development and growth plans. There's not a person in my senior executive today doesn't know that this company is going to continue to grow at some fantastic pace, and they've got to figure out how to keep up with that, or put people. And that may mean they got to put people in their departments. That may mean we've got to do, but it causes, growth causes issues and problems. The simple problem is we're out of office space. We built basically 2 office buildings in St. John. It overflow our office space from Charlotte County that we've had 2 or 3 offices. And we're at the point now, like, where we're going to go? We're at the point we're outgrowing our office space again. And, it's just part of the overall. But if you don't plan to grow, put the people in place to grow, you can't grow. And that's one of the things we were known for. And when I fall behind this, that limits growth. But one thing we always did earlier, we put the people in place before the growth. So we'd go out and hire people before there was really a whole plate of in front of them what they were going to do. And then basically we grew to fill their plates. And if we kind of get behind that we don't have the people in place and the growth is out in front of it, it really slows the growth. So I think it's very important, to understand people are part of that growth. The right people is in having them in place at the right time.
I heard it said an idiot with a plan can be a genius without one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
It's, look, I'm not going to say there hasn't been huge challenges along the way. I mean, I can sit and talk about, the tremendous challenges that we've had, whether it's in, I always look back over, when you do something or maybe you plan to do it this way and it ends up going this way and you wonder how and why it all takes place. But, like it's like the failure at the first is kind of my college education. I mean, it's where I learned. If I didn't fail, there's no way I could have been where I'm at today, because I would not be able to understand, everything. I mean, I went in there blind as a guy, and if I was successful from the beginning, I would have just been, there would have been no education behind me. And my education comes through failure and getting back up on the feet and moving forward.
yes, so good, really good. Well, I'm always impressed with that success mentality in your company, but I also know that you have to protect that, and you've taken some criticism. So I'd like to talk about criticism.
Sure.
Customato, which everybody believes made Mike Tyson said, if you're afraid of getting punched in the face, two things are going to happen. You're going to get punched in the face and you're going to lose the fight. I mean, you face criticism from legal aspects, political aspects, and out of 9,000 employees, there's got to be one or two that aren't great teammates. I mean, how do you keep criticism from getting into your heart or into the heart of your leadership?
To sit here and say that, criticism and we've had issues, we had a major West Coast of the United States issue with a cage collapse and a bunch of environmentalists. And then we had, bad PR in the environment. To say that all doesn't sit and bother me, but I don't dwell on that. I mean, criticism is stuff that, no one likes criticism. I don't know anyone that likes to be hit over the head, but you can't sit in the criticism. You got to build above it. You kind of got to put things in place, and if it's rightful criticism, you got to make the changes and build whatever. But like to sit and just dwell on the criticism, it doesn't serve a purpose. Like I don't have time to do that. Like if to me is a purposeful business career is 80 years old max, and there's people involved older than that I certainly hope that I give them all the credit for. But so like you can't sit around whelm in the trough of the pig. Like to me is if you get that criticism, you gotta take it. If it's true criticism, you got to make the changes and help it mold you. If it's unfair, you need to fight back where you can fight back, but know that you're not going to win. You can't win against the press, and you can't win against environmentalists as far as the press goes, because both those have unlimited resources or unlimited words where, I have to be focused on doing what I'm doing. So, we certainly have communications people hired and all that to deal with all that criticism, but it's one step at a time. You try to keep your reputation intact and build your reputation, but you have to move forward. To me is if I look at it and I'm a big believer in this is, God doesn't want us to, the devil does not want us to be successful as a business. So there's going to be roadblocks put in the way. And, some of the criticism comes from that side of things. And so if you recognize that, some of this extreme environmental terrorism stuff, if you recognize that and not being of God or not being of good, then I think you face that head on and you don't worry about that. That's just someone throwing darts at you that aren't going to pierce you, and you move on.
And we got some great questions coming in, but I kind of want to dovetail that because without that connection to Christ, I mean, I don't know how you humanly do it. How does your relationship with Christ practically affect your day-to-day operations?
It's vital. I mean, I always take it as Jesus walking on the water and Peter, trying to walk on the water. And like, if I take my eyes off Christ, then you feel the water and, you feel the water and you see the water and you feel yourself sinking. Like there's too many stresses, there's too much challenges we go through as a business, especially a first, like this is the first generational business we're building here. So, like that, I couldn't imagine doing it alone. Some of the places we get into and the so-called messes we get into, and all of a sudden there's an escape route, or there's, like, God is got his hand. And to me is, like relationship with Christ is so important because you cannot take your eyes off Christ, or if it is, I couldn't do what I do. The fear would overwhelm me immediately. All those stress things that I can throw off, and I've seen that and know that, like, you can't take your eyes off Christ because that is so important in this business. Because, the places we operate and where we operate and a lot of our, we probably have over $1 billion of swimming inventories around the water at any given time, swimming that are, exposed to hurricanes, to, predators, to whatever, it. And so, it's you can overwhelm yourself very quickly with worry, right? But you can't, but relying on being a strong Christian and with Christ is so important on that.
Yeah, that's so good. What a great example. I've got some questions here from a variety of folks and then some students as well. Julie asks, what's the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
Well, I've had a lot of them, and thank God, Lord let you build to the challenges, like it's because you wouldn't want them all in, I there's just been different, but I guess, a few years back, our company, which I feel was not, was singled out, and we had an environmental charge against us, me personally. And I think that was probably the biggest personal hit that I took, because, like, to me, is I always try to operate very much above board. We certainly work with, have tons of environmental certifications and have an honorary doctorate in environmental science. Like, it's always been a big part, and ended up being that type of thing. And the end is we settled it and it went away, but we hit with the negative PR around that. It was kind of a very, very bad slap. And I think that was a tough challenge time for us. But I mean, there's not always challenges within this business. There is. I mean, they're just the nature of a business.
Well, what would, I think I know that time period that you're referring to.
Yeah.
What change did you make as a result of that, or did you make any?
Well, I mean, we did a huge corporately and put a lot of things, spent a lot of capital to ensure that, something like that, we couldn't get into that type of situation again. But, I think it's, I think every challenge you can kind of come through in life, you can't, it's going back to my comment on failure. If I hadn't failed, I wouldn't have got my education, or wouldn't have be ready for the next step on the ladder. Like to go from 0 to 2.4 billion in sales, you take a young guy, graduated high school, wants to set the world on fire. You want to do that in 6 months or 6 years, whatever. But, obviously, God needs to prepare your steps for growth. Yeah. There's a big part of, I think sometimes we look at trials and errors in your life and you say, oh, gee, we didn't have to go through that, didn't they? But, there's steps to build you for something bigger. And every time I come through a big challenge within the business, I think, gee, there must be some big steps of growth coming forward, because I obviously had to learn something more that I didn't know. So,
Yeah, it's so good. I've always felt like I just want to figure out what I haven't figured out. What don't I know that I need to know?
yeah.
It'd be nice to know it before I need to know it.
Well, that's the thing, and not have to go through it, but that's
It doesn't always happen that way.
yeah.
All right, I got some other folks chiming in here. Great to hear from everybody. Josue from Spain.
Okay.
We're connected to Josue because of Cooke Aquaculture. How do you implement Christian values in a company in today's world?
And there, that can be a challenge. I mean, we have certain parameters because, obviously we hire, 9,000-10,000 people globally. They're obviously cannot be all Christians, number one. And they certainly, even if they were, may not be the same stripe that you are, and the same beliefs, the same personal beliefs and around standards or whatever that you may have. So it's important. We have strong, what I call, we try to drive family values through the company. We really control, what we allow in the company for, like alcohol policies and stuff that would, we think could damage the employee, especially from a travel perspective. And there's things and parameters that we put in place, and we try to hire, best we can, family style individuals. Not saying that doesn't occur and that everyone sits, but you got to kind of build the framework and work within the framework. But believe me, with the government and the challenges in this new woke environment, all those things become much more challenging as you do from a business. But I have to say, we have a lot, like our key executive have, either are Christians or very strong moral people that really fit and drive the culture through the organization. So I think in the key, it's a cultural driven thing that we have to do.
In this, you really do have a family oriented business. As far as this is a family business. I mean, your family started this, but then, I know that you really care about your employees, and, your life is being watched by so many people. So, it's really you, not that you need the pressure. However, that people are watching you. They're watching how you act, how you react. How do you manage Glenn?
Well, up front, I'm obviously not anywhere near the perfect category, and much as people can strive, I'll never get there. But I think to me is I have to stay within those parameters that you set for yourself, for your your Christian walk, and that's a key element of it. And I think just make sure, and I think part of it's who you surround yourself with as well. I mean, to me is, I surround myself with people that, believe the same I believe, or, are very strong moral people. And I think that really frames it for yourself, helps you. And you got to set, I have a whole lot of wearing that, you got 10,000, almost 10,000 people globally that we employ. I take that to heart. If we have to have a layoff in a region around the world, I worry about the families, and and particularly a lot of the places that we operate are small rural areas, whether it's, in New Brunswick or in the state of Maine or Virginia or Spain or Chile. We operate in areas that some of them are pretty small areas that are really reliant on your employees in those communities to stay successful. So I wear that. So some of the decisions we make, we need to be careful about our decisions, because it impacts more than yourself. It can impact a lot of employees.
Really good. We have a lot of different varieties of leaders here, but I really would like to get your insight for pastors. You said you felt called to ministry, but you didn't feel like you were called to pastor. And but what are some things that, I mean, you're a church man. You're a member of a church.
Yeah.
You've been around a lot of pastors. You've been around a lot of pastors. What are a few things that you've learned in the business world that you wish pastors knew in the church world?
I think there's, to me is, like we want to grow our churches, obviously, and there's a growth. And like to me is, I always talk about the lost at any cost.
Yeah.
But, I hear pastors talk about that. But then I see pastors don't do things that they should be doing to drive that. They're not hiring right. They're not holding themselves to the same criteria as far as, work ethic and you have to surround yourself around with the people, and you got to walk above the criticism. I think that's a big thing is you can get so downlaid with people criticizing things going on, but if you have your growth plan and you're working up here, it's a different level. I'm a big believer that, like if you put the right things in place, growth will be there. And one thing I have to say, and I've seen this, and there's no individual pastor, but I think pastors need to be very careful of this word called insecurity. Because when you get insecure, then you're not going to build your team because you're not going to rely on your team. And some of this insecurity I know happens through church hurts. This church over here hurt this guy before he come here. But if you let that insecurity build up, you're never going to rely on the team. And without that team, you're not going to be able to build the growth you want to build. And so it's mastering that for that growth. I just think there's a lot of potential guys get so tied up with being so insecure that they won't drive the growth. And I think I think that's the key to me is hiring right, and don't be insecure. Like one thing I've always told people, and people don't take this kind of different, but make sure you hire someone better than yourself. If I've got a team leader, the first thing I said is go hire someone better than yourself. Because someday you're either going to want to step up to a new position or maybe you'll retire, but you got to hire someone, you get the right person underneath you, it's going to make you look a lot better, and not worry because you're the boss that you're going to lose your position. So one thing I always try to do is make sure I hire as much as I can people that are better than me in the certain things I need them for, like whether it's sales or whether it's, legal, whatever that. And I think it's very important to, I think it's all around an insecurity. I think if we could get, and I understand where it comes from because there's, obviously through church hurts and stuff, but I think the insecurity thing really hurts. It keeps a lot of good men and women down.
Yeah. I think pastors, I love what you're saying about hiring because it's so easy to hire doers, but it's not as easy to hire leaders.
That's right.
And you limit what you're doing by hiring only doers. How have you hired, and maybe us pastors can learn from this, I know we can. How do you find a leader? I mean, what makes somebody stand out to you that's not just a doer, but they are a leader?
Well, a leader will have some followers and would position themselves, right? But it's like that's part of it. And we have, we have some what they call predictive indexes. There's some tools we use because we hire a lot of leaders, but like to me, but a leader should be leading, like basically you should see the leadership qualities in a person.
Yeah.
Right. And they should be all over them. So we need to, as going back at my comment earlier, if you want to grow as a church, well, have you already hired the staff for the growth, or are you waiting for the growth to overwhelm the staff that's there so you end up in a mess? Because if you want to grow as a church, you better hire the staff now. Because that if you don't, you're not putting a plan in place. And the other thing you're telling me, you don't really believe you're going to grow if you don't want to hire the person.
Wow.
If you want to grow and you believe God's going to let you grow and you believe in it and you're committed to it, then hire the person. God didn't get a bunch of animals standing around the field and tell Noah to go build the ark. He told him to go build the ark. Then he brought the animals, right?
I don't know that God called you to pastor, but he might have called you to preach a little bit. I'm taking notes, by the way. Sunday's always coming. Let me get some other questions to you here. Here's a good one. And again, this is not a guilt question, but what does, I personally don't think balance is reality by what the culture says. What does balance mean to you now?
And I presume you presume you're talking about balance. You mean your house, your family, your personal, your business?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a tough question, and I will say is you know, I probably could do more balancing. I mean, family is vital to me and very important to me, so it's always a tough thing to keep that balance exactly where it should be. My wife will always say you should be home more, and the business will always demand me to travel more. And part of this, again, as I taught before, this business is not just a business. It's a calling, right? So, I'm sure there's challenges are there for pastors, how much church versus how much family. And there's a balance there. And I feel, that balance, and that's always been a challenge. And I've tried to put things in place that I'm home more as much as possible, particularly weekends, but I work a lot. I work a lot in the evenings. It's just the nature of what we've created and what I believe God has allowed. But I do think it's vitally important, that Christ stays center of that balance, and you just got to make sure you give your family what you can and need, and the business as well. But it's always, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the best at balancing, because I don't think there's any utopia on the balancing thing. I just don't think it's ever going to be. You can get a guy that's retired and he hunts too much and doesn't spend enough time home, and so it's a balance thing. So it's always a challenge.
I think I've noticed from a distance with you, any times I've been around you, it always seemed like you had scheduled, like everybody's coming together at this time. It seemed like you planned time, like you just didn't wait till it came. It seemed like you planned the family gathering here, planned the family gathering there. Is that a pretty steady part of what you try to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to make that, you got to know ahead of time, so you're just not trying to fit them in.
Right.
That's a key part of it. And it's always a challenge, but like family is a very important thing for me. I mean, beyond God, it's the most important thing. So to me, it's my extended family beyond my wife and two children. So
yeah. How does, in a practical sense, how does the health of your marriage affect you as the leader of Cooke Incorporated?
Yes, I think it totally affects me, obviously, because if there was something wrong in the home where we had a disagreement or an argument or something, I wear that, right, to me. So like, I'm a big believer, you can't let the sun go down on my dad taught me that, good biblical truth. The sun never sets on wrath. So like, to me, as I try to make sure that, because it will affect you. If your home life is not where it should be, it's going to affect your work life. There's no question. And it could be over something simple, it could be over a disagreement, but you're sitting there wondering, and, it's just because my mind is very compartmentalized, right? When I'm in business mode, I'm in business mode. But if there's this little compartment in the back of my mind that's bothering me because you left home this morning and you had a grossy word, then that'll sit there and affect the front lobe. So.
Yeah. I heard James Robison, probably one of the greatest preachers in America, say that the better his marriage was, the better his church became.
Yes.
It's like God honors that part by giving you favor in the other part.
That's right.
Yeah. Your company is very generous. You're personally a very generous person. I just want to tell everybody, and in a very short snippet, we got a guy here on the staff, Scarborough, was your pastor.
That's right. Yeah. A very influential pastor. Yeah.
So he was growing that church. How did his pastoring affect your vision as a young man?
Well, if you know Sky at all, there's not a lot of stands between him and what he wants to accomplish. There can be lots of obstacles, but he just finds his way through. And you know, what I saw with Pastor Burrow is he basically, you know, knew where he wanted to get to, and everything else in between was just things he had to get through to get to where he was going. So you know, I think, to me, as I very quickly saw, that he was a doer to get things done, and how important it was not to get scared away with all the little roadblocks in between to get something done. And you know, you know, understood the growth and understood, you know, that whole concept. And I think he also understood people, you know, the people that, you know, he would have around him for, you know, working with them and that type of thing was people that had that same type of growth mentality, or same work mentality, I would suggest, to do that.
Yeah, it's fascinating that this pastor was affecting a very future leader, and he had no idea what he was doing at the time for you. So he has told me that in those days, I don't know how old you are, maybe 10 or 12, but he was receiving offerings, and you brought him either a box or a bucket of nails and basically said, "This is all I've got, but would you take this?"
Yeah, well, basically a little more, I guess, that story is that, you know, there was always contemplation on building a new church, and never got done. So, you know, I went and I bought the box of nails, and you know, that box of nails sat underneath that pulpit until the church was started to be built. And you know, I think it just, to me, it was my part of saying, well, you know, this guy's doing it, they're doing it. This is, you know, my actual thing. Let's, you know, and I tried to talk to a couple of young guys. Oh, you know, chip in to buy. I'm going to buy, you know, box of nails. Oh, so we should just buy one. And to me, I always never forgot that. But here, you got to, what's the cost of one nail? Like you're you know, you're sitting there, but that's the mentality you can get against. You can get against the guy that wants to buy one nail, the guy that says, let's go buy a box. Yeah. Because the box will get something accomplished. One nail is not going to accomplish much. And I was young, and I happen to say I'm glad that new church got built and those nails got used. And Pastor Burrow was a big part of getting that done.
So you were a giver right from that beginning. And I know that your mission, and you have said that you really believe that God has favored you to be generous, especially to missions.
Yeah, I didn't go one step. I believe it's part of the calling. Like to me is you know, I've been very active. My parents were very big givers coming up. You know, we didn't come from money, but you know, but they were always, you know, they give what they had and give in commitment. But there was a lady called Maisie Lyons. I'm sure there's people on the phone on here may know Maisie, and Maisie's gone to be with the Lord today, but she was very involved with what they called Atlantic Missions, which was kind of the churches in Atlantic Canada that come together to support missions and back in those days. And so we would have missionaries show up at our house on a regular basis. They come to preach in the church, and normally they end up with mom and dad's with Maisie for dinner. And so we got to know some incredible people globally, but God really put a stirring in my heart to say, like, you know, to build a company up that can support missions in the mission field, and obviously other works to drive the gospel through. And I really believe God, that's what he's done. It's part of the calling. And that's why I'm very careful, you know, like, you know, I'm very human, but, you know, God has allowed this to, you know, build what it has with the team around us, and allow us to build. And to me is to win the loss. I mean, that's the end goal here, right? I mean, that's the goal for, you know, it should be goal for churches, but it should be goal for people that, you know, where their funds go and how they support. And so I'm a big believer that we have to win the loss.
So good. So good. I want to respect your time and wrap this up. Give me one or two things that you feel like you want Cooke Incorporated to do for humanity.
Well, to me, it's just I want to advance the cause of Christ. I mean, overall, I want to make sure that we are winning souls and we're helping, it's kind of perpetual annuity that we can keep giving on a yearly basis to help grow, those works around the world and different ones we've been involved with and continue to be involved with. I want to make sure that we make the lives of our employees better. And I think that's a Christian responsibility, as a corporate responsibility, that, we have to make our people and the communities we live in and work out of better places. And we got to make sure they develop, and they can develop a place that they're happy, they're building. And so that's important to me. Like, to me is obviously God number one. And to me is employees a big second there from a corporation, to make sure that we're doing things wisely so that, we keep those employees making livings and good livings and developing their careers and developing the communities they work in.
That's so good. Thank you, Glenn, so much for your time today. It means so much to all of us and so many that have joined. And I hope that you can get some big salmon on a fly rod this summer.
That would sound very good.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much, Glenn. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much now.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And if you would just follow the instructions that are going to come to you next, and we'll keep you informed. We're already planning our next Leadership Insight webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today.